Just a little bit about myself so you know who's talking to you today. My name is Brian Coase. I am currently ranked as a sergeant but serving as an acting lieutenant for the Denton Police Department. There's a long-term but temporary at the moment vacancy, so I've been bumped up. I'm the next lieutenant to get promoted anyway, so they just bumped me up to an acting lieutenant in the meantime. So I've been with the police department almost 19 years. I started back in '03, graduate of UNT and all that. Went straight to the police department, did a few years on patrol, then transferred to our traffic unit. And that'll make sense why that's important here in a little bit. But did about 8-9 years in the traffic unit and decided it was time for a change of scenery. So I left the traffic unit, ended up back on patrol for a whopping 2 months, and then got selected to be the department's public information officer. The guy on TV, you may recognize the name from a couple of years back in the police blotter and all that. About 30 to 40% of what we actually said is what actually got printed, so take that with a grain of salt, that not everything you read in the police blotter is the actual fact there. But did that for a few years and then promoted to sergeant back in 2019. Went back to patrol for a whopping 6 months this time before they sucked me back into the traffic unit to supervise the traffic unit. The traffic unit here at the Denton Police Department, we have our motorcycles, we have our commercial vehicle enforcement folks, and then we also have our nighttime DWI enforcement unit. But any serious bodily injury or fatality car crash is investigated by our traffic unit. And so we kind of pride ourselves on being top-notch investigators. We send folks to weeks and weeks of additional training to be able to reconstruct crashes and things like that. And we try to leverage technology to make that more efficient. You've probably seen, when there's a bad crash on the highway, how many hours the highway has been shut down because there's a lot of work that has to go into that. Unlike detectives that can close a door to a house and seal it off and come back later if they need to get more evidence, we have the one shot. So we can't get in a hurry and miss stuff because we can't go back out and shut the interstate down to find that missing piece of evidence. But we want to speed that up. And so that's kind of what drove our flight towards looking into drones. I'm kind of a tech savvy guy. So we were using, we were all trained on the very old school triangulation with 2 long tape measures and, things like that to map everything. It was a very manual process. You take it back on the big board and do manual measurements to scale the map. Then we got the total station, which is like you see surveyors use. They walk around with the pole and take shots at specific points of interest, and then we draw a map off of that. About 2015, 2016, I came to understand there is a new technology, and it's a 3D laser scanner. So it sits on a tripod, it rotates 360 degrees, it's a 3D laser scanner, and it captures everything in 3D at the scene as it is. And we can take several of those scans and stitch them together and basically capture a virtual version of the scene as it existed the day of or the night of the crash. And so that sped us up a little bit. Not as much as we were hoping, but it did allow us to capture a lot better evidence on those crashes because now everything's there. Fly through it, walk through it, look at it from the top, look at it from the bottom, whatever you wanted to do, we had all that data. We went from collecting about 100 points to 200 points, all the way up to collecting about 20 million points of data with the laser scanner. Then we learned about 2019, shortly after I came into the unit, that now folks are using drones to map scenes. It started with the agricultural field, and then pretty quickly law enforcement recognized, hey, there's an application for us as well. And so started doing some research in 2019 about that. Really it was designed, hey, the traffic unit's going to get a drone to help map crash scenes. What we realized, though, is that everything that we would have to have in place to operate the drone to map a crash scene really opened up the door to all sorts of other potential uses for the drone. And so pretty quickly, we pivoted to say, let's not limit ourselves to just mapping crash and crime scenes. Let's see what else we could use this drone for. And so in 2020 is when we just kind of started working with several other public safety agencies in the Metroplex that already had drone programs in place, and they were a great source of information. You know, we could learn from their missteps and errors and things like that. I'd say Euless PD, for example, Euless Police Department and Fire Department, they have a joint team. They were very helpful with us in our conversations with them, kind of explaining how they set up their team there. And we actually decided in the later part of 2021, and we said, hey, let's do that here in Denton. Right, let's get with the fire department, who we found out was also interested in getting a drone for search and rescue activities and arson investigations, things like that. And so we said, well, instead of us each going on a parallel but separate path, let's just merge that effort and create a public safety team. And so by the end of 2021, we had a handshake agreement with the fire department. Surprise, surprise, we do get along occasionally. And we decided that's the direction we were going to go. They have the exact same drone that we have. So it's a mirror image, and our pilots can fly their drones, their pilots can fly our drones, and it works out great. And then in 2022, after we presented, this is actually the presentation that we gave to council. I added in a couple of things for you all, but once we kind of got the green light from city council, we began the program. And so it's mission capable, except for the fact that that's the only drone that we have now, and I'm here with it. So if they need it, I'm going to have to skedaddle up there. So some of the things, like I said, we started with just mapping crash scenes and crime scenes. But we pretty quickly understood that the search and rescue aspect of it was huge, right? We can cover so much more ground from the air than we can putting people on the ground on foot, especially at night when the bulk of, all of their search constitutes how far their flashlight will shine. So that's fairly limited. And if you didn't know, we don't have a whole lot of officers on the street. So any kind of major incident, we can't bring the whole shift out there, and the whole shift is about 13 officers. So we're lucky if we can get 5 or 6 to a major incident, and so that's even more restrictive on our ability to search big open areas. Crash and crime scene investigations, disaster management. We've had a number of flooding events and tornadoes here in town, and I was working the night where the tornado hit the north side of town a couple of years back. There's a whole neighborhood up there in that area they call Idiot's Hill. That I didn't call it that, they call it that. It's some old Denton thing. But we couldn't access big chunks of the neighborhood by vehicle. So had we had a drone, it would have helped us get some situational awareness, get up in the air, because once the storm blew through, it was clear skies and calm winds. We could have gotten it up in the air and kind of prioritized, hey, which house do we need to get to first? Because, for example, one of the houses that we did hike into, a tree fell through the house and cut it in half, and severed gas lines and stuff like that. And a lady inside wasn't very mobile, and she's stuck inside the house. So fortunately, we just stumbled on that house towards the beginning of the scenario, but the drone would have helped us in that case go, that's where we need to go first, right? And then finally, protecting citizen and responder safety. A couple of reasons. The fire department likes it because the fire department, it's kind of odd here in Denton, but the fire department runs the bomb squad, not the police department. I've never seen anybody else do it that way, but if that's something they want to do, we're more than happy to let them handle that stuff. So our fire department mentioned taking a look at suspicious packages, right, from a distance. Instead of going downrange towards that package, get an aerial view of it and see what they can figure out from a ways away. We like it for finding hidden suspects, and if we can find those hidden, potentially armed suspects from a distance, from the air, then we don't stumble upon them with the 6 foot beam of our flashlight in the dark woods. And so when we have distance, we have opportunities to negotiate and come to a successful. When we turn a corner and we're faced with a guy with a gun pointed at us, there's not a whole lot of opportunities to negotiate that. So we haven't experienced it yet, but we expect that this will keep not only officers safe, but also the suspect. Give us some opportunities to work through this. I'm actually the co-commander of the hostage negotiations team as well. We have a 100% success rate so far in negotiating peaceful surrenders. So this is a huge priority for me. Give me and my team a chance to talk to this person, and odds are we're going to be able to end this peacefully. All right? So all kinds of different missions that we've realized, but we also recognize that drones can be a highly politically sensitive issue. Right? People are still afraid of drones. There's still some skepticism over it. There's a lot of skepticism about the police department using it. As we talked with citizens, we heard some of that concern about the police department using drones. Ironically, nobody had a concern about the fire department using them. So we just said, well, we'll just have the fire department fly all of our missions and everybody will be okay with it. But once we talked through it, we understood, hey, we need to make sure that we have some like pillar principles that we put in place, and you'll see those up here. So respecting privacy, expecting accountability of our pilots, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, and transparency and how we're going to be transparent, and then the training that we provide. We kind of saw those as some core areas. What guided us was Texas used to have this law. And the government code, chapter 423, there was actually a law that dictated when law enforcement was allowed to use a drone. Nothing in the law about when a firefighter can use a drone, just law enforcement. But we said, okay, it's a pretty good framework to do all those core principles that were on the last slide. We could only use it, we could only collect an image if it was in the search for a missing person, investigation of like a murder or a crash with serious bodily injury, or any crash on that federal state highway. That's just them trying to get the highway opened up quicker. And you can see down the list, pursuing a felony offender, documenting a felony crime scene, and so on down the list. This was all spelled out in chapter 423 of the government code. So we gave this presentation to council, and literally within 24 hours of giving that presentation, an appeals court judge struck down this whole chapter. It doesn't exist anymore. So technically, anybody can fly anywhere, subject to airspace restrictions and all of that, and take images. Now, we still feel like this is probably a pretty good guideline for us to stick under, so this is what's been codified in our internal department general order. These are kind of the lane lines that the pilots have to stay within. Obviously, we know policies don't cover every 100% of everything, but a deviation from this is going to probably require someone higher ranking than myself to authorize. It's going to have to be independently justified. But yeah, you can see it's fairly strict, not just flying around like this. We kind of highlighted what we would not consider to be okay, right? Just randomly flying around looking into people's backyards would clearly not be okay. Right? Might be legal now that 423 has been disbanded. Yeah, but still not appropriate use of a city's drone. So we're not going to use it for that. If we have a search warrant, then search warrants are like gifts from judges, and they allow you to do whatever the judge tells you to do, and in fact commands you to do it. So we have to go do it then. We can't, constitutionally protected actions and speech. There were some concerns over, we had some protests a couple of years back, and the Denton County Sheriff's Office also they have a fairly robust Sheriff's Department drone program, and so they had a drone over all of those protests. So we had eyes in the sky. Now, what the drones were not used for was like zooming in on faces and doing facial recognition and, hey, we're going to figure out who all's out here protesting. What it was good for was a lot of those protests became marches, and they started marching around the city. And despite our attempts to ask the organizers, hey, if you'll just tell us where you want to march, we will go block those intersections and let you march. They didn't always tell us where they were going. So the eye in the sky was very helpful in us we had a live stream video of where they were going, so that myself and my guys in the traffic unit back then, we were able to zoom up ahead and try to get these major intersections shut down so no one got ran over. can't search private property, and we can't investigate non-felony criminal offense crime scenes. Exception is these motor vehicle crashes, because some of those do result in misdemeanor charges. So, any questions so far on kind of use cases and what we use it for and won't use it for? It's public safety based. Counterparts, some of you may have heard, are like Kitty Hawk and some of those other flight tracking, usually for commercial purposes, fleet management software. This one is geared for public safety, police, fire, EMS, and emergency management. And they're based here in Texas. So we like the fact that we could take a short drive and knock on their front door if we needed to. And that they're public safety based. And so what DroneSense helps us do is record all of our flight data permanently. I am the super mega administrator for our DroneSense account for the police and fire department, and I do not have the ability to delete anything. It can't be done. Right? So if that drone was flown, there's a record of it, and there's no one here at the city that can do anything about it. So we like that. We feel like that brings a layer of accountability in that, you know, if somebody's out there flying the drone like they shouldn't be, there's going to be a record of it. They're not going to be able to get away with it. It also helps us and kind of protects us, because if someone alleges that the drone is being flown inappropriately, well, we have the record to go back and confirm whether or not that's true. Either confirm that or say, that didn't happen. Our drone wasn't over your house, right? Flight records, maintenance schedules, even our training checklist, we're still building that section out on what kind of training we're going to have the pilots go through. Right now we're just kind of in the baby phase of the program. We have 3 pilots now. We have a 4th one very ready to go, and then the 5 and 6 will come in probably sometime this summer, and then it'll just keep growing out from there until we get to an adequate size that we've got 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week coverage. Public safety interoperability was huge. Yes, sir.
Quick question. What's the job category for a pilot? That's a non-law enforcement position, I presume?
No, they're all officers.
They're all officers.
So right now,
policy?
with the it's not, that part's not in policy, with the exception of me, now that I've been transferred out of traffic and I'm the watch commander for a patrol shift, I'm the only pilot that's not in the traffic unit. So the plan right now is to build out our pilots within the traffic unit, because they already have their own smaller chain of command. It's just easier to manage, get them to training and stuff like that. Once we branch out to other sections of the department, it's just going to make it more complicated. But no, they're just like, there's 2 officers, a sergeant, and another sergeant. So it's not a separate, it's just kind of an add-on thing.
Okay.
This public safety interoperability was huge for us. A lot of agencies in Texas are using DroneSense, including the Denton County Sheriff's Office, Texas Department of Public Safety, and Texas Parks and Wildlife. UNT Police Department is a great active partner with us. They are looking at getting the exact same drone as us, and they're looking on signing on with DroneSense. And what's nice about that is if we're flying a mission and we need another drone out there, we can share a 6-digit alphanumeric code with any other agency that's also using DroneSense, and everything merges. So they can see our live streams, we can see theirs. On the map, we can see where their drones are and which direction they're flying. All kinds of seamless kind of interoperability. Once that mission's over, we close the mission out. All of their flight data goes to their database. All of our flight data goes to our database, and we've severed that connection. So that's really nice for us, because our
CPS using that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, our primary partners that we would most likely use as the second wave will be UNTPD, and then after that probably the Denton County Sheriff's Office. We've talked to Argyle PD, has started a drone program, and I talked with their chief about DroneSense, and it sounds like they're going to sign on with DroneSense. Corinth PD, sounds like, you know, they just started their program and they're probably going to hop on DroneSense. So everybody around us is going to have interoperability. We're all playing off the same sheet of music here, so that's kind of huge for us. The secure live streaming, while the drone is up in the air, the camera's on. It may not be recording, but it's on and it's live streaming video. Folks in the command post can see that live streaming video. Or if I'm sitting at home and I know that one of my pilots is up flying, I can pull out my smartphone, log in, and I can watch the video from my smartphone. right? So that's huge, right? If we're looking, we're working a large scale something, for the command post folks to have some idea what are we seeing, they can put it on a huge screen while we're looking at a small screen and kind of help us do that. And the best thing is it's only $99 per month. So it's fairly cost efficient for government stuff at $99 a month per drone. So right now we've got this drone, and we've got 2 Mavic Pro drones that we actually got in a large theft ring seizure. They were stolen from UPS, and UPS, once the theft ring was solved, said we don't want them back, they're yours. So we had 2 brand new in-box Mavic Pros that we didn't pay a dime for, that we've connected in with DroneSense, and those are our training drones, because if the new pilot crashes it into a tree, we're out. $0 for that drone. So that's great. Over here, I know it's probably hard to see, but this is our flight reconstruction screen. So I can pull up any flight, and if we have time, and I'm gonna run long, I always do, but if we pull up any flight, it will animate the flight for us. And so this green line is everywhere that drone went. This was one of our early training missions. So we can zoom in and look around, look under, over. You can just fly around the drone, and you can tell exactly where the drone was, which direction it was flying, which direction the camera was facing. All of this is a permanent record. So again, back to the accountability, if someone has a question of, hey, I think that your officer was maybe spying on my pool. Well, okay, let's find out, right? We'll bring up that flight. There's no video or picture stored in DroneSense, just the flight data, so we can say, well, yeah, it flew out here and it hovered with the camera pointed at your pool for an oddly long amount of time. Now we got a problem. Or we can say, yeah, it flew out close to your house, but if you look, the camera was facing the opposite direction. So it may have looked like they were, but they were actually looking out here in the field, right? So that's been a great help for us.
You get a lot of those calls?
No,
Good.
No, we really don't. The only calls I've ever gotten about the drones in town was somebody called in about a drone flying over Loop 288 in Spencer, and they were like, why are y'all flying over Loop 288 in Spencer? I was like, well, we're not. Well, no, I think it's y'all. I was like, it's not us, because the drone is sitting on my desk. I'm in my office. It's not us. It turns out it was a traffic survey company that had it up in the air doing traffic counts instead of laying the tubes out across Loop 288. So there's usually some investigation to figure out, well, who is it? Are they complying with FAA rules and stuff like that? But we'll know exactly if it's ours. So just some transparency stuff, engaging with community groups like this, just being open and honest about what the program is and isn't. You may have noticed, if you follow the police department social media feed, that if we have drones in the air, they're going to mention that in the post that they put out about it. We've really done a good job over the past couple of years. If there's a major collection of officers at a scene, it's probably going to be posted on social media, so that if it's something that the public, we think, needs to probably know what's going on, they're doing a good job about pushing that out, and it'll include information about whether or not a drone's being used. And then at the end of each year, we can export the flight log and kind of redact some of the specific information. We could say that on such and such date, the drone was flown over Robeson Ranch, just kind of generally, and for what purpose, right? We were looking for a missing person. And so we're going to post that on the city's website.
Are your videos public information or no?
They could be. They could be. So pretty much anything that the government does is public information. If it's subject to an ongoing investigation, then that would no. So if we do have a criminal investigation going on, that video is not going to be released. But if we're looking for a missing person, there's no criminal charges coming out of it, and somebody interested wanted to file an open records request, I don't think we'd have the ability to block that.
Who stores your videos?
So the amount of video we're producing right now is relatively small. The good news is that DroneSense has teamed up with Axon. Axon makes our tasers, our body cameras, and our dash cameras in our squad cars. So in the future, once we start producing enough video to make it financially worth it, likely we'll sign on with Axon Air. And so all of our videos, whether it's from the drone, the car, or the body, or the interview room or the jail, all of that video is going to go into the same cloud-based secure storage that the Axon company uses. And the good thing about that is it's unlimited. Whatever we ingest from an Axon product goes into an unlimited data bucket. So we can record we can record hours of video, ship it off to Axon, it's their problem to store it. So.
Okay, now, you say you got limited, what's limited hours? I mean, I've got 200 hours just on this drone, and I've had 4 different drones, so.
So we don't have a full account of all of the hours from all of our pilots because we started training with the Mavic Pros before we signed on with DroneSense. So unfortunately, those hours we can pull off of the drones if you can remember who was flying which one at which time. But going forward, it's still relatively low hours because we're just in the baby phase. So I think I can pull it up here in a minute. It's around like 20 hours, I think, total. So the challenging thing for us is anytime we go fly for training, we just committed to tell everybody that. So it's not like, hey, I got a free 5-10 minutes here, let's put it up and run a training drill. It's got to be more, we got to get with the public information officer, we got to let everybody know, we're going to be at this location between these hours to do that. And as luck would have it, every time we schedule training, it rains, or there's a big crash, or the city falls apart, and we can't go out and train. So,
Last program.
yeah. So once we get it fully up and running, everybody's going to have their 107 remote pilot certificate. They have to because we are flying commercially, getting paid to fly. We'll have a new pilot training program, which is currently being built, the ongoing monthly training sessions, assuming staffing and weather allow us, and then regular policy reviews and even some written examinations on the policies and federal rules and things like that, just to make sure that I want my pilots to be experts in all things to do with UAS, because what we found out from our conversations with ULIS PD is people that were violating the FAA rules. Well, the drone team was the go-to responder to those types of calls because they knew all the information. They knew what you had to have in place and what you didn't need and so on and so forth. So I'm fully expecting that'll be our case as well.
You said that DroneSense follows your drones. You're also signed on to DJI?
No.
Okay, so you're, like I'm linked to DJI and I have exactly the same thing on the flight paths, and it shows which way the drone's facing, and it shows the exact
no, so when we're flying on the controller, we're actually flying through DroneSense's flight app, not DJI. We chose the DJI Enterprise Advanced because it was the latest and greatest that wasn't 5 figures. So we kind of started small. Maybe someday we'll build up to the more expensive, bigger ones. But we went with DJI specifically because around 80+% of all public safety agencies in the United States are using DJI products. To be perfectly candid with you, that's problematic because there are those in the federal government, and now that's trickling down into some state governments that think that the Chinese are spying on DJI products. That's not a concern for us because they've actually, even the feds have never found any tracking devices or technology in DJIs that they've reverse engineered, 1. 2, we don't fly with DJI app, we fly with DroneSense, so it's going to Austin, not to China. And then 3 is, you know, I don't know how robust the Chinese spying is, but I'm pretty sure that they're not very interested with a random intersection in the city of Denton. Like if they want to know about it, they could look at Google Earth and find out everything that they're going to see from these drones. So it wasn't a big concern with us. The concern is, like Florida, for example, has come up with a list, or they're working on a list of approved drones that government agencies in Florida can use. And guess what? They're all made in the great United States of America, which sounds great, except that they're all 3 to 5 times the cost with less features. So if we go that way in Texas, we will have to kind of re-rack the deck and figure out which direction we're going to go. American drone manufacturers don't share their APIs with DroneSense currently. So every agency that's using DroneSense will be wiped out if we can't fly DJI products, and we'll be forced to go to a commercial program that businesses use. Even some of those they're not really covering, like your Skydio drones and stuff like that. Skydio is really close to the vest with their APIs, and they're not sharing a lot of that information. And so I don't know what the future will hold if Texas decides to go the way of Florida, which we usually do. We'll have to kind of re-rack the deck and figure out from there. But it won't be us, it'll be every fire department, police department, everybody else in the state of Texas. Because Corinth was like, hey, we're not going to use DJI drones, right? So they bought an Autel drone. Well, Autel is a Chinese company. So it will not, that drone will also probably not be included on the approved drone list if we go that direction. All right, so, but for now we went with it. It was, like I said, cost effective, $6,500, came out to eight grand once we got batteries and things like that for it, so that we believe that that was a good entry level to kind of cut our teeth with and expand out from there. But it was nice because it comes with this 32x zoom color camera, which is great. I mean, we're not flying any higher usually than about 150 feet for most of our missions, so 32 times zoom is really getting in there, letting us see what we need to see. And keep in mind, we're not shooting Hollywood films here. All we need is decision-making clarity, right? We don't need cinematic clarity. So if it's a little pixelated at 32 times zoom, but we can tell that it's a man holding a rifle, that's sufficient for us, right? We don't need that in 4K. We just need decision-making quality. 640 by 512 thermal resolution camera, which this is interesting because Euless PD and Denton County Sheriff's Office, they have a $20,000 to $30,000 Matrice 210 drone, the DJI drone, the big one, and their thermal camera is 640 by 512. So theirs comes in a big case, ours comes in that small case, and we've got the same resolution on our thermal camera, which is honestly our go-to camera for most of our search and rescue activities. And this one was kind of nice because it comes as all the Enterprise drones do, with the strobe that we can put on for nighttime flights, spotlights that we can put on, and even a loudspeaker, so we can say, stay where you are, help's on the way, or we can start giving commands to a suspect, you know, lay down, put your arms out, before we ever have to put an officer downrange. So here is, like I said, our thermal is kind of our go-to one. This is in the black hot mode. There's several different color palettes. This is a training with our K9 units from all over the county came in, and all the drone operators from all over the county. This was actually taken by our drone. There's a bad guy right there that just got taken down. So the K9 guys and the drone guys, the K9 guys are the cool ones, right, with the dogs and the, you know, they're the cool ones, and then we're like kind of not the cool ones because we've got all of our technology over there. And so we had a competition. We said, we sent the bad guy out, go hide in the woods. Neither team will know where the guy went, and we'll see who can find him first. This was the very first night flight we took with our drone. We took off, I was flying, we took off. 60 seconds into flight, I scanned the thermal camera around and saw him sitting out there, a nice dark spot in the middle of the woods, and he goes, 60 seconds. This video is shortened because it took the dog almost 6 minutes to finally sniff his way around and find the guy. So that's what we're talking about, and kind of being a force multiplier and things like that. And then even after it's done, we're able to stay on station and monitor, you know, if something goes south, somebody starts fighting, whatever. Just like we want to capture that information on a body camera, well, we might also want to catch that information from the air. So we can stay on station and just kind of follow them back. Yeah, he's still got the sleeve. He took the sleeve off of the role player, and he's not giving it back.
That's his trophy. He doesn't let it go.
How high are you when you're doing this?
So this one, we had 4 different drones in the air, and I can't remember what our assigned altitude, but each one of the 4 drones had an assigned altitude. So you could go no higher, no lower than an assigned altitude, but that allowed you horizontally to go wherever you wanted without having to worry about another drone.
So you went 200 feet there.
I think we were assigned, we put the old Enterprise duals, because a couple agencies out there had the older version of this drone. and they have really bad thermal cameras compared to this one. So we gave them the lower altitudes to give them a fighting chance of seeing something. And then we took, I think, 150, and above us is Denton County's Matrice drone at 200 feet. I've got another couple of videos, but I think this is the one to show you how sensitive this is. You'll see the dog stop here in a minute. I think this is the one. Make sure. Yeah. Yeah, this is going to be the one. So, like I said, this is white hot, and this is like perfect atmospheric conditions. It was cold, so everything out there was cold. It's about 9 o'clock at night. Yeah, the dog stops right in here for a second. Right there. And he just peed. So we captured the canine taking a little pit stop there, and you can see how sensitive the thermal camera is. That's good. We can see that. So if someone does
Another spot over there in the corner.
yeah. So that's actually, we went back and flew over there. It's just some random metal like sewer outlet or something. This is up at the 428 Greenbelt Park, almost into Aubrey. So yeah, like I said, perfect atmospheric conditions though. It was about 30 degrees out there. Here's all the drone pilots, all the vehicles we had people from Cook County, Wise County, and Denton County all out here. You can see the engines are hot. So what you're used to seeing from like a police helicopter, we're getting really close to that here without having to buy the $500,000 FLIR camera that they mount on a $3 million helicopter.
That's amazing.
So yeah.
I believe on the Mavic 3 they did improve the resolution a bit, but not hugely.
And just as a comparison, here's what the color camera caught from the same scene.
Yeah.
So it records color and thermal simultaneously. So color camera, that's what we had. So thermal camera, 150 feet in the air, we could see this whole area, and we could have guided officers in. But you see the limited beam of their flashlight, and if this guy that they're looking for was actually armed, imagine the danger that they're in walking through the woods out there. So yeah. And then the last video is just another deal at the training exercise, just to kind of show a couple of the different palette colors we found in those atmosphere using the black hot, where the hotter objects showed black was the best. I cut this video down a little bit, but when we first took off, we saw all kinds of little critters scattering around out in the field. And then yeah, he's got this is the second go around, he's got the bite sleeve again. So there's we started kind of just playing with the different color palettes.
You can see it looks like another drone.
Yeah, another drone is right over here.
Yeah.
That's one of the other agencies flying. This is the Red Hot, which is adjustable, but it can help us in a person search because we can set it to look for people type heat. The fire department can set it with higher thresholds to look for fire type heat. So they can look for hot spots at a grass fire or something like that. Even in the broad daylight, this thermal application has been super helpful for us. Hold on. So that's what we call, that's called rainbow. It's one of like 20 different color palettes, and we were just playing around. This one is usually used more for building inspections and things like that, flying over solar panels to see which ones have gone bad, flying over rooftops to see where there's heat leak or cold leak out of the roofs. Again, the Black Hot was our best one. So I don't have internet access at the moment, so I'll just pause for any questions because I've already taken up all but 3 minutes of my time. Yes, ma'am.
What kind of illegal use of drones do you see?
So what's interesting is I'll say this first. In the Texas Transportation Code, there are offenses that apply to aircraft, state law violations that apply to aircraft. They didn't mean for it to, but the definition of an aircraft in the transportation code describes a drone. So we think helicopters and fixed wings, but they actually describe drones. So not only can someone get crossways of like the federal rules of flying over people, cars in restricted airspace, things like that, excuse me, but they can also get contrary to state law. And actually the state law is probably worse than getting crossways with the FAA. The FAA has like 6 criminal investigators throughout the entire United States. So an example was there was a car rally at the Embassy Suites about a year ago, and myself and some other folks were working an overtime gig out there just patrolling the car rally. Well, there's a drone that keeps buzzing over people's heads all around the car rally. And I told the guys that were out there, I said, if someone find me that guy that's flying that drone, he's got to be around here somewhere. And eventually we did. We tracked him down in the crowd. So I go talk to him and I say, hey, do you have your 107 certificate? No. Okay, are you here for fun or did someone hire you to be here? Oh yeah, the event hired me to come take some video and pictures. Problem number 1, all right? Transportation code, federal regulations say you have to have a 107 certificate. The transportation code says that a pilot must have a pilot's license. All right, so now you violated the transportation code. That's a Class C misdemeanor, believe it or not, a ticket if you don't have a pilot's license. I said, is your drone registered? No. Okay. Do you have the tail number on the drone? No. All right, well, under the Texas Transportation Code, not having a tail number on an aircraft is a 3rd-degree felony. So the FAA charges you like $5 to register a drone, but if you don't do that, the state says that's a 3rd-degree felony, like prison time. So, and not only that, but Embassy Suites is square in the middle of the restricted airspace for the Denton Airport, as is a majority of the city, actually. About 50% of Denton is under the airspace. So he was wrong all kinds of ways. The game wardens have realized that if someone is intoxicated while flying a drone, they have met the elements of the offense for flying while intoxicated. Yep. Which is the same level offense as a DWI or boating while intoxicated. And so some game wardens that I was in a class with that are out on Possum Kingdom Lake were all excited to see how many flying while intoxicated cases they could go find, because they said there's drunk people flying drones around all the time out there. There's other things. There can be invasive video recording and things like that are in other sections of state law. Obviously, we don't have the power to do anything on the federal side other than report it to the FAA, but there are several laws that I don't think a lot of people consider on the state books that we absolutely do have ticketing or arrest power on. Most people are just knuckleheads and don't realize, like this guy, was it really worth putting this knucklehead into jail for a 3rd-degree felony because he didn't print out his little tail number on his drone? Probably not, but it is a tool in our toolbox, so that if him, once I laid out, here's all the things you're doing wrong, he packed up his stuff, left, and he's like, I'm done. But what if he had said, yeah, what are you going to do about it? I'll show you what I'm going to do about that. Right? Yeah.
Do the news stations, how do they handle their drones, the news stations?
Same deal. They're on 107s now with the low altitude notification system, the LANT system. If they're flying in airspace, you can get that approval, within seconds usually. So that's just what they're doing. Around here, I haven't seen any news drones come up this far. Instead, the news stations have people running around Denton County in like Ford Explorers that are not reporters, they're not on camera, they're just cameramen or women, and they just show up and record footage from the ground.
How do the drones fly at the southern border?
They've got special government waivers, so there's all kinds of. Normally you can't fly a drone around the southern border, but law enforcement and media can get the special waivers. You can get a waiver for just about anything with the drone if you craft the application correctly. In fact, there's a company that just last week got approval for like an 1,800-pound drone, which is pretty surprising.
What would they do with it?
I have no idea.
It's got 1,000 miles.
Carry load and fly forever and stuff like that, but
But the news stations, that's not DPS flying those drones, it's news stations.
Right,
and they
yeah.
They can obtain waivers too.
yes, yeah,
You can obtain waivers yourself.
right.
We are actually under Denton control zone on the northeast side here.
Right.
My yard is under Denton. If I take off to hover in my yard,
Which is great because once you get it downrange, when you see that artificial horizon tilted, you know, something like that, then you really know if you're hovering in place and it's tilted, you got a pretty good indication that it's fighting the wind pretty good. But yeah, we can do a split screen, thermal color, or we can go all the way thermal. You know, so that's in white hot mode. Okay. And then we can change those color palettes, and then the nice thing is, like the strobe, we can remotely turn it on and off. What we found really helpful is in this one, it actually has the lights on the bottom, which we can toggle on and off as well. Hit the right button. No, so that's the one problem with DroneSense, is it doesn't allow you to put that light onto a function switch. But so right now it's in auto mode, which means if it's flying, it'll come on once it gets about 30, 40 feet above the ground and light up the landing zone for us. But what we also found is when we turn it on beacon mode, it won't do it because it's not high enough in the sky. But it's almost like an anti-collision type strobe off the bottom, which the other drones that we were flying with in those test videos, they didn't have that. And so once we realized, hey, ours is the one with the strobe on the top and the bottom, that really helped us figure out what ours are. So,
Brian, what is discrete mode?
Discrete mode is, it turns off all of the lights. So, if I hit it, you see all of the LEDs have turned off. Wouldn't technically be legal to fly, but if we needed to sneak up on a bad guy and it meant keeping people safe, I'm willing to pay the heat on that. But we're also going to lose where the drone is in the sky. So we've never used it. I don't imagine that we'll use it very often, but having it on there is good. Right. It's a great addition because the Mavic Pros didn't have that. Didn't have any lights on the bottom, and so we'd have to illuminate the landing zone to really see what it was doing there. So there we go. Put this back so the next person that uses it isn't confused. So we can pretty easily change through the thermal palettes. That's black hot there. And like I said, there's just a ton of different ones. Really black hot and white hot are the two ones. My preferences. The rain. I think it's just the color. It's just difference of colors. So you look at pleasant colors, I guess, while you're...
so it doesn't filter out if it's raining.
No. Well, and that's the one problem with drones, or this particular drone, is it's not water resistant. So if it's raining beyond a small mist, we're not going to be able to fly. But yeah, we can toggle the video and everything picture just like a normal drone, but using DroneSense to do all of that. It's still stored on the SD card on the drone. It's not, none of the videos or pictures that we record go to DroneSense. Just stays on the SD card. We can plug the SD card in the office and offload all that into our camera system. So we found flying even in the daylight, we will typically put the strobe on there. We may or may not turn it on, but it does really help pick it out of the sky if you kind of blink and then you lose it for a second. Because for whatever reason, DJI has made these drones the same color as the sky, which is...
Oh, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference to most people once it gets up in the sky because it looks black basically, no matter what color. But watch your eyes.
So those are from Firehouse Technologies, and that's who makes the red, white, and blue one as well that we're looking at getting. So they're pretty bright.
Wow.
The only problem with the light bar effect is that you have to turn it on and off before you take off.
See the difference in long, short?
So having two on there, if you have multiple drones up at night, would be super helpful figuring out which one's which. The only complaint I have about this particular strobe is that it's so short, so close to the top of the body of the aircraft, that if the aircraft is facing away from you, you can't see the strobe from the ground. From the air, which is designed to show, it's fully visible, but from the ground, you kind of lose the strobe.
Full dot in the center is the spotlight.
Go away. Go
As
away.
you get older too, some of the tabs don't sense your fingerprints.
So you can see
That works pretty well.
that's pretty good, and this is adjustable, so you can fly over if you're doing search and rescue. And what's nice about this is when it's on, it really is sucking down the battery pretty quick, so we don't have to fly around with it on. We can remotely control it from here, turn it off, and use the thermal camera to find the person. And then once we find them, bam, we can light them up with the spotlight and switch over to the color camera and get a little bit better information because that color camera zooms in a lot farther. We also experimented with like subject takedowns, like we've called somebody out of the woods where we'll put the drone directly over them, camera looking straight down at their head, and the spotlight on. And so the officers are standing there, you know, giving commands and everything, but the person's just illuminated, and about 20 feet around them, they're illuminated. So the officers can see everything on them, where their hands are, things like that. And just the psychological effect of there's this drone that's following my every movement with a light over me. Maybe I don't do anything silly here at the last minute. But yeah, I really like the spotlight attachment. You know, if we do have to go to another drone company down the road, a lot of them aren't offering this. Autel has kind of stolen this idea, but most of the other ones like Skydio aren't, so we'll have to depend on aftermarket folks to come out with something that we can attach to it. We did actually look at Skydio. It made it to the short list. It was down to 3 drones made it to the short list. It was the Skydio X2 Enterprise X2E. It has a thermal camera and a color camera on it. Crazy anti-collision sensors on it. They advertised that it could fly through doorways because the anti-collision sensors would shrink down to make it through a doorway, and that you could do this 360 view where it took all the anti-collision cameras and actually stitched them together so you could fly into the middle of a room and see the entire room. And I was like, well, that's pretty sweet. It doesn't work with DroneSense, so we'd have to use Skydio's app and figure out another way to keep track of everything. But then I call them up and I talk to the sales rep, and the drone itself, this one was $6,500, $8,000 all included. The Skydio was $17,000, and it was only $2,000 a year to activate the inside collision avoidance sensors and 360 view and everything else. And so when we started putting that all on paper, we're like, that doesn't make any kind of financial sense It's perhaps a better drone. I know it's got like a 100x zoom versus our 32x, roughly the same size thermal sensor. It's certainly a more capable drone, except it doesn't come with the speaker, spotlight, anti-collision strobe, and costs like 3 times as much with thousands of dollars of yearly ongoing expenses, where, you know, it just didn't make sense at the time. Hopefully Skydio, if they actually want to sell a lot of these drones, which right now California is big on Skydio, if they want it to come to Texas, they're really gonna have to lower their prices. I guess we're just more picky here in Texas about spending that kind of money. What's that? We got this one in about summertime 2021. So, for those of you who know firearms, we all used to carry like 1911, you know, firearms. First half of my career, you carried a 1911. And then slowly we got smart and we switched to Glocks like every other police department in the world, because I can clean a Glock with a toothbrush. And my 1911 I had to disassemble into 64 individual parts and find to make sure that it wouldn't jam. And so I say this, well, the 1911's like driving a Cadillac as a squad car. It sure is nice when you're driving around patrolling the city in a Cadillac, but let's just face it, leather seats and all that stuff, it wasn't made for patrol work. And some of the same things are true with drones. Like, you know, there's some really nice drones out there, some other manufacturers out there, but when you start looking at the price and the features and everything else, it's not really the right fit for what we're doing. And primarily for me, it's in the type of work that we're doing and the type of environments that we're doing. It's not a matter of if we're going to crash this drone and destroy it. It's just a matter of when. And so hopefully that win is several years down the road, but eventually we're going to be looking for that missing kid, and there's going to be a tree in the way that we fail to navigate. I'm a little bit more comfortable going to the chief and explaining that we crashed a $6,500 drone. It's still very expensive. It's still $6,500 of taxpayer money, but it's not $30,000. So it's got to make it a little bit better, right? Like, No. So we consulted with the city's risk management, and it's covered under the city's self-insured, and something of this monetary value is more than adequately covered by the city's insurance policy. So,
How is the drone program received in the rest of the department, and where do you see this 5 years in the future?
So it's received well, but because it's so small scale right now, you know, like this, I'll take the drone home with me tonight. Now we all have, if you've got enough seniority and stuff, we have take-home vehicles. So my Tahoe out there will be parked in my driveway when I leave here. But if they need the drone, usually we need it like right now. But what it's actually going to be is they're going to call me, wake me up, give me the rundown. I'll get dressed, crawl myself out of bed, get dressed real quick, hop in the Tahoe, and drive across town to the call, which could be a 30-minute delay. Or the last time I was called out, I'm up at Evers Park watching my boys play baseball in my own vehicle and my own clothes and everything, and I live down here off of Fort Worth Drive, closer to you guys than there, and the drone is at the PD. So I got to race home, change clothes, hop in the Tahoe, race back up to the police department to grab the drone, and then race out to the scene. And so now we're looking at a 45-minute plus delay getting it there. So I think once we have some more pilots, enough to ensure better coverage so that they're not waiting 30, 45 minutes for the drone, and we get some really good wins under our belt. We've proven it for crash mapping. So far, we haven't had a win, right? We haven't found the bad guy yet. As soon as we do that or find a missing kid or whatever, I think the popularity within the department is going to be even more. I think officers see it as a great tool right now. They're looking forward to what the future is for it. So in 5 years, I think we'll probably be set up a little bit more like Louisville PD, where Louisville has 2 drone pilots assigned to every patrol shift, and they drive specially equipped Tahoes. So instead of the normal drawer system we have in the back of our Tahoes, they have specific ones that hold the drones, have a big TV monitor, have charging stations. They are purpose-built for drone applications, and they've got 2 of those running around 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so when they call for a drone, boom, it's there. That's where I see us in 5 years.
Do you have the technology to fly that drone remotely if somebody else sets it up and puts it on the launcher?
No, not on these drones. There are drones that do have cellular connections. And in fact, one of the reasons why Skydio, I think, is so popular in California is there's an agency in California that got a beyond visual line of sight waiver, and they're actually flying Skydio drones from a landing pad on the top of their police department, and the pilot sits downstairs on the 3rd floor of the police department in a room and flies it from there. And it's this drone as a first responders initiative. And basically, any calls, they're launching the drone, getting the drone overhead while the officers are still driving across town to get there. We're a long way from that. We'll definitely have to upgrade our drones to more expensive ones with cellular capability, a lot more waivers and convincing the FAA that this is a good idea.
You do know that you can actually be one place, have somebody take that drone 2 miles away, turn it on, it will link back to you, and you can launch it from 2 miles away.
Yeah, the range is pretty good in most environments. We did have some issues when we were flying the Trinity River for the drowning a couple of weeks ago because of the trees and the terrain out there. We were actually not losing flight connection, but we were losing video connection, which was the first red flag of video goes first, and then we definitely don't want to push this any farther and lose flight control as we're flying this slalom course down a river between trees. So it's just kind of hit and miss. Usually to keep it in visual line of sight, we're never going to get that far. But so yeah, that's where I see the future. I think as people, one of the big deals that we discovered while we were talking to community groups is a lot of people's vision of a drone was like the Predator or Reaper drones that the military is using. And it's like, no, it's this, right? There's no missiles, there's no guns, there's nothing on it. Watched a YouTube video, a guy like tied like 3 Ozarka water bottles to it and it wouldn't take off. So if it ever is going to carry a weapon, it's going to have to be a really, really light one that hasn't been invented yet. So I think that's been helpful. And doing just stuff like this, I mean, you guys are enthusiasts, so you're already kind of up to speed on some of this stuff, but we've talked to some other community groups, and when you bring it out of the box, they're almost like underwhelmed. They're like, what's in that box? Is that the controller? I was like, no, that's everything. It fits in the box? I was like, did you expect me to bring a flatbed here or like a Reaper drone on the back of it? That's not what we're talking about here. So I think once the public gets a little bit more comfortable that this isn't the end of the world. This is just taking cameras that we have in our windshields, cameras that we have on our bodies, and just putting one up in the air 100 feet so we can look down and have another perspective. But like anything, it'll take some law enforcement agency somewhere to do something stupid with theirs, and it'll affect all of us, and legislation will come out.
Law enforcement, drone user groups, or public safety groups?
There's one that's out of the North Central Texas Council of Governments. It's the PSERT group, Public Safety Unmanned Response Team. Every single county in North Texas Central Council of Governments, which is like 30 counties, is allowed to join that group. My intention, and we've gotten some head start on it so far, is we are not going to join PSERT because PSERT started when drones were rare in public safety. And so if you join PSERT, they could call us up at any moment and say, hey, we need you to go respond to Ennis, Texas to go fly this mission because we're looking for extra pilots. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me these days when there's probably double-digit number of public safety drones within Denton County now with all the different agencies. And so what I started putting together was a Denton County drone working group with Argyle, Corinth, UNT, us, Denton County, Flower Mound, Louisville, the Colony, Frisco. I mean, everybody's got drones. We were like, other than Argyle and UNT, we're like the last agency to finally blaze this new trail here. But we've had I've got 25 different agencies now on that list. Those videos that we did of training, That was kind of the first iteration of it, where we had all those agencies from around. We had some people, like I said, from Wise County and Sherman PD, Cook County and Gainesville PD. Grayson County, Cook County. The Wise County guy couldn't make it, but they all want to join on to the Denton County working group now. So now it's probably going to extend outwards a little bit to help some of those lesser populated counties that don't have the resources that we have here in Denton County. Our chief, our outgoing chief, is real big on, we're kind of the big brother in the neighborhood, Denton PD, as far as the number and amount of resources we have. We're the largest agency. So he's real big on, if a smaller agency calls for help, they're going to get our help, which I kind of appreciate. It does cost taxpayer money to go out and help another agency, but it's nice to do that because you never know when that other agency is going to have to come here and help us as they have before. So,
When you fly urban environments or around trees, do you ever use the Yagi?
no.
It will extend your range by about 40 to 80%, depending on whether it's trees or urban.
So the first time we've ever run into an instance where we were losing connection, two places. One of our primary training grounds early on was C.H. Collins, the football stadium, but just north of the football stadium are those highline power lines. So we learned real quick, don't go that way, go the other way, because we'd start to get some interference. And really the only other time we've had video cut out was flying the river. So that's interesting to hear that may be a solution for us on that. But,
You know, what the Yagi does is it focuses the signal.
right.
The signal's based on lobes, and some are stronger. You're stronger in some directions than others. The Yagi focuses it, and you're limited to about 45 degrees from the center line either direction, and about 30 degrees up and down. So you have to keep the antenna pointed towards the drone.
Right.
But if you're flying around trees, or if you're flying in an urban environment with a lot of local area networks and other interference, or like you said, power lines, you can maintain the visual as well as the drone itself by the Yagi or the Yagi Uda.
That's good, and we know we're experts on turning just the right way because our radios, we didn't used to have as many radio towers, so certain parts of town you'd have to stand just right or do the Statue of Liberty, which is where you like raise it up as high as you can get it and try to point it towards a tower to get connection.
I've done that with my transmitter.
Yeah. So we fortunately have switched to a digital radio system, and that problem's largely solved. There's very few places in town. The river, again, was one of those. No cell phone, no radios, which made it challenging to coordinate a search, but we're modernizing. It's good now. I could talk on the radio. They used to not work in schools or hospitals or the mall. No problem, right? Radio, police radios, fire department radios not working in hospitals, the mall, or schools, that was no issue. But now that we've upgraded that, we're good now. So
When you're using the phone, or like me with my no fingerprints, I always carry a stylus clipped to my harness so that I can hit the little tiny icon.
that's a good idea.
Some that you hit, you reach down with your finger on a phone especially, and your autofocus.
Right.
your
Yeah. Yeah. So
Right, they're so close, you hit two at once.
what I like about this controller is that it came with the screen built in. What I don't like is that the screen's relatively small. But as far as a rapid deployment, the fact that I have like two pieces, I turn that one on, I turn this one on, I connect to some sort of hotspot, and I'm ready to go, is nice. I don't have to put the iPad in and things like that. Our Mavic Pros that we got as our training drones, we'll also use them to map crash scenes and the like sometimes. Those, we have iPads that we got to stick the iPad in, and we have to buy an aftermarket thing to hold the iPad. So it takes a little bit longer to get those up in the air than these.
How is that during daytime?
Which one?
Your-
That's a Crystal Sky monitor. It's just a smaller version of it, so it's great in the daytime. The iPads, not good in the daytime. They just don't get bright enough.
Yeah, I've got a shade that goes around.
Yeah.
It just slipped on.
But fortunately, usually if we're flying with the iPad, we're flying the Mavic Pro and we're flying a mapping mission, which there's software that just maps out the autonomous flight, a grid, And so we'll just fly back and forth one direction and fly back and forth the other direction. And it's just taking tons of pictures. And then there's software back in the office that will take those pictures, stitch them together, and make a 3D point cloud. It will make the same end product as our 3D laser scanner, which has opened up some pretty cool possibilities. Haven't done it yet, we haven't tested it yet, but in theory, we could take the laser scanner out to the crash scene. The crash is at 3 o'clock in the morning, the highway shut down, and we can use the laser scanner right then and there on the ground to get all the stuff in the immediate area. But really we want to map like the approach paths and the grades and everything else leading up to the crash. Well, for that, we can use the laser scanner the night of, reduce the number of scans we have to take, decrease the amount of time we're on the scene, and then come back the next day and fly it with the drone a much wider area in a fraction of the time, and then we can stitch those 2 point clouds together to make them one using the software that we got. We mapped for the one out by the airport. It was at Jim Crystal and Western, if you're familiar out there. It was a intoxication manslaughter case that we charged the guy with murder because he's gotten a bunch of DWIs. So big case, right? He's on trial for murder. We decided we wanted to map an area. This was the first time we had used the drone to map, so we had already laser scanned it. This was just kind of like bonus material if we could get it to work. And so we're using the iPad to set the flight path, and forgot to look in the bottom right corner where it told us the area that we were going to map. And so we ended up mapping half a square mile. We didn't need half a square mile, but we mapped half a square mile, and it took 25 minutes to do that. And so we're like, okay. And so we're still, like when we had the total station and we got the laser scanner, we would total station every scene, and then we started laser scanning with the total station because it's kind of like dipping your toe into the water. We weren't fully, remember, we only got one shot to get all that evidence, so we weren't going to put all of our faith in this new technology. And that's kind of where we are here. We're still scanning, but now we're starting to integrate the drone mapping and comparing the end product. And eventually we'll get to that comfort level of putting all of our eggs potentially in the drone mapping basket. Downsides is you can't map at night. And believe it or not, crashes happen at night, a lot of fatal crashes. So we won't be able to drone map those as is. We'll still have to scan those. You can scan at night. You can't fly at night to map. But the 380 crashes that we had were real long scenes. The two back-to-back ones, I don't know if you remember a couple of years ago, that kind of expedited all the improvements that they're doing out there. Those are really long scenes, 18 to 2,000 feet long scenes. And so it took us forever because they're too long to scan at that point. And so we're using the old school total station because it just has a longer range and allows us to open traffic back up to some extent. And so between that, the distance, the heat, the guys having to, we had a couple of guys that had to get IVs, chilled IVs from the medic because they got so overheated out there, 6 hours. And then like 6 months later, we got this and we could have flown it all in 20 minutes and had the same product. So looking forward to that.
The Mavic 3 will map at night. They have a new program that allows you to do.
If you get a LiDAR sensor, you can get the bigger drones with a LiDAR sensor, which is, so the reason why we can total station at night and we can laser scan at night is because it's a laser, right? And if we scan a scene at night, it's grayscale, it's not color, but it assigns the grayscale value based off of the reflectance of whatever that one of 20 million points hits. So we can be in a completely dark room, scan it, and we'll get a grayscale 3D image of that room as if the lights were on. So they do make LiDAR add-ons for drones that you can use the same. It's actually using a laser to map the scene. Super expensive right now. Once that price comes down and our confidence goes up, maybe that's the direction we go in the traffic unit. But yeah.
It's always been a real improvement in the abilities.
Yeah, it's amazing to get the view in the sky. If you didn't know, there's only 3 helicopters in the Metroplex for police: Fort Worth, Dallas, and DPS. And the DPS helicopter is based in Garland. So takes them a bit. Cost of fuel, cost of maintenance, it's about $300 to $400 an hour for a helicopter to fly. So Fort Worth and Dallas PD have politely declined to assist us with their helicopter. So they're not going to come out. The only time we see Fort Worth or Dallas helicopters if they're chasing somebody that came out of Fort Worth or Dallas. DPS is pretty helpful, but right now there is one DPS trooper in the entirety of Denton County because the rest of them are on the border for the expected end of Title 42. So there is one DPS trooper in Denton County right now. The helicopter is more often than not also deployed elsewhere for disasters or border stuff. So this is great. It gives us, it's not maybe as great as a helicopter that has better range and better cameras, but it is a great, cheap, cost-effective alternative to when we can't get that helicopter here. Kind of put some, alleviate some fears and concerns.
It's recording now, so.
Okay, so everybody stand still for just a second.
Yeah.